Looky, looky, I got hooky.
Hook, no!
I wish I had a dad. Like you.
What if Rufio didn't die in Hook? This is FanScription. This year marks the 30th anniversary of Hook. Despite director Steven Spielberg later admitting he wasn't proud of the film and critics really hating it, that Rotten Tomatoes score is absurd, the 1991 Peter Pan sequel of sorts has stood the test of time and become a favorite of a lot of audience members who grew up watching it. Robin Williams' transformative portrayal of an older Peter Pan, the big elaborate sets, and John Williams' criminally underrated musical score are just a few things that made this movie so memorable. It was a what if in and of itself, asking what if Peter Pan grew up. But there's another what if out there that I've always personally wondered about, and it involves a character made especially for this movie. Rufio was the new leader of the Lost Boys after Pan left Neverland years earlier. He was intimidating, formidable, and had a very unique look. Dante Basco's confident performance is still talked about today, and the character's tragic death at the hands of Captain Hook is still an effectively emotional sequence. But what if Rufio didn't perish by the sword of James Hook? What if he had lived on and was developed further? Also, how would this affect the other characters in the story? Peter, Jack, Maggie, Hook himself? This would have changed things drastically. The following outline isn't just about Rufio, but about how that event going differently could have altered the path everyone was on. I am ecstatic to tell you guys that we got the actual Rufio, Dante Basco himself, to voice the character for his dialogue here. I can't thank him enough, so special shout out to him for being such a great guy. Go check out his Rufio prequel short film and other updates on future projects available on his social media platforms. Now, without further ado, let's answer this question and much more. What if Rufio didn't die in Hook? So to make this whole thing work, we're going to have to change Hook into a two-part story. Everything in the original movie happens the exact same way until the final fight that pitted a rejuvenated Peter Pan and his Lost Boys against Captain Hook and his pirates. Peter begins the attack and is about to re-engage with Hook when he hears his daughter in the distance.
Jack! Save me!
As Peter fights to free Maggie, Rufio crosses swords with Hook. Smee, after stealing as much of Hook's personal treasure as he can carry, sees the danger at hand. The tide is turning against the pirates. Thinking quickly, he yanks Jack away from gawking at the captain and Rufio's fight and flees. Peter is shown defeating the pirates guarding the captured children and reunites with Maggie. Tinkerbell is nearby, and wanting his daughter out of harm's way immediately, Pan tells her to get Maggie home now. The fairy sprinkles her with pixie dust.
Maggie, all you have to do is think one happy thought, and you'll fly like me.
Mommy.
Tink, you know the way.
What about Jack?
We'll be just behind you.
Maggie and Tinkerbell then start floating away, just out of the grasp of reaching pirates, as Pan goes back after his nemesis. The same sequence plays out with Rufio and Hook, where the captain gets the advantage over the Lost Boy. But before Hook lunges forward with his killing blow, Peter swoops in and carries Rufio out of the way. The force blows Hook on his backside. Pan and his successor crash land into a pair of barrels a dozen feet away. They lay there for a comedic moment, buried in broken wood.
Thanks.
Don't mention it.
We cut to the battle continuing below for a few seconds. The Lost Boys are gaining a clear upper hand. When we return to the site of the crash, Peter hops up and extends his hand to help Rufio up. The boy clasps Pan's hand when we hear the unmistakable sound of steel piercing flesh. Peter's expression turns to shock. He still holds onto Rufio's hand as he collapses into his arms. Standing above them is Captain Hook. Everyone in the area stops fighting. All their heads turn to the scene as a deathly silence is observed. Rufio is panicking, not knowing what to do, as Peter Pan gasps for breath in his arms.
Save Jack.
Rufio locks eyes with Peter.
Save my son. Please.
A tear falls from Pan's eye as both close for the final time. Peter Pan is dead. A faint wind blows, and we see the whole island go silent. Life throughout the land can sense that Peter is gone. The quiet is disrupted by the evil laughter of Captain Hook, echoing across all of Neverland. Tinkerbell hears it and fears the worst, but keeps Maggie's attention forward as the island shrinks in the distance. Rufio's eyes change from sorrow to fury as he looks up at Hook. The captain continues to laugh and taunt the boy.
Rufio. Rufio.
He picks up the pan sword and slowly rises. Rufio's shadow blocks out the camera as Hook's guffawing slowly fades into a haunting whisper. The whisper blends into a quiet breeze as we see Maggie on the ground in front of the Peter Pan statue in Kensington Gardens. A brown bag hangs off her neck as she slowly awakens. Bright light is seen above her, but it fades away before her eyes fully focus. Confused, she stands up to see the statue of Pan, and we get a close-up of it before cutting to Maggie reuniting with her mother, Wendy, Liza, and Toodles at the house. She's accompanied by a few police officers and the inspector from earlier in the film, played by Phil Collins. While Moira is hysterically happy that her daughter has been returned, she speaks to the detective, half in tears.
My son! Have you found my son?
Not yet, Mum. My men are searching the rest of the gardens now. If he's there, we'll find him.
He motions to Maggie.
She's been quiet since we picked her up. See if you can get something out of her.
As they continue to talk, Wendy brings Maggie upstairs to the room she shared with Jack. Toodles follows. She shuts the door and hugs her close, then questions the girl softly.
I'm so happy you're home, little one. Where's your father? Where is Jack? Are they still there?
Maggie is barely able to even take in what Wendy says. A somber, blank expression is frozen on her face.
I don't know.
With pity in her eyes, Wendy pulls Maggie in close and hugs her again. The girl's eyes shift to Toodles, who's staring at the wallpaper of Captain Hook. He turns around to Maggie.
Have to fly. Have to fight. Have to save Jack. Have to go back.
Maggie looks scared as Wendy continues to hug her. She peers at the Hook wallpaper again as the soft wind blows into the room from the open window. The rhythm of the wind begins to slightly resemble Hook's wild laughter as we cut to black. Hook Part 2 would start with the delicate tones of John Williams' When You're Alone in piano form. We fade in from black and are in the middle of Kensington Gardens on a close-up of the Peter Pan statue. Children laughing and playing are heard slowly getting louder in the background. Snow has gathered on the ground on an overcast but bright and bearable cold day. A teenage girl stands in front of the statue, lost in thought. After a moment, a snowball hits her in the side of the head. She looks to see a group of kids snickering. They're all pointing at the smallest kid, who looks apologetic. This is Matthew. He's 9 years old and the runt of his litter. Often coaxed or forced into doing things the bigger kids mock him for, he doesn't talk much.
All right, that's enough. Let's go, now.
The kids verbally expound their disappointment, but go along with the teenager. She pulls Matthew aside as the group walks ahead.
Matthew, when are you going to stand up for yourself? You don't have to do everything they say.
I'm sorry, Miss Maggie. If I didn't do it, they said they would put snow down my trousers again.
The girl looks sympathetic.
Come on, let's get you some hot cocoa.
The teenage girl leading the group of younger kids is in fact a 16-year-old Maggie Banning. It's been 10 years since she returned from Neverland. Her father and brother never came home, and since then, she and Moira moved into Wendy's house in London, hence her accent. They reopen the house as a small foster home, continuing Wendy's legacy. It's been 5 years since she and Toodles both passed away. Maggie takes care of the kids when she's not in school and grew up with a mostly happy childhood considering what happened to her father and brother. She doesn't have any real memories of Neverland. They slipped away quickly after flying home, but Wendy tried for years to jog her memory so she could somehow save Jack and Peter. As Wendy got older, Moira considered her delusional and senile. She passed away with her family believing she had gone the same way as Toodles. That night, we see that Maggie sleeps in another room of the house. She drifts off and dreams, as she often does, of flying with her father and brother. Different variations of the same dream have been occurring intermittently since she was a little girl. The pleasant sequences always turn dark when she sees a strange silhouette appear. The figure stands tall and brandishes a large hook. It laughs like a man gone mad. The shadow always lifts its hook high into the air and strikes downward right before Maggie wakes up. This time, it's the middle of the night. She goes downstairs to get a glass of water when she sees her mother sitting alone. Moira was never the same after Jack and Peter went missing. She's done her best for her daughter and has always pushed forward with a smile, but a deep sadness has lied within her for as long as Maggie can remember. She never remarried and often buries herself in work involving the foster home.
Mum?
Moira is startled but puts on a happy face.
Maggie, what are you doing up, sweetheart?
I couldn't sleep. Had a bad dream.
Again? How long's it been?
At least a year.
She looks to a clock that reads 12:36.
It's past midnight.
Moira looks away and sips out of her mug.
I know.
Mum, if you want to talk about...
I'm fine. Maggie, a decade of grieving is more than enough. Let's not make this day any harder, shall we?
A loud stomping noise interrupts them. It's coming from upstairs. Moira exhales, annoyed.
Get them out of there and put them back to bed, will you?
Maggie goes to the second floor and notices the attic stairs have been pulled down. She climbs up with a flashlight to see Matthew digging through a coffer of Maggie's old trinkets.
What are you doing now?
Surprised, he pops his head up.
They made me, Miss Maggie. I'm sorry.
Maggie shakes her head, grabs Matthew by the arm, and pulls him down the stairs. The camera stays in the attic for a moment as the moonlight shines on the coffer Matthew was plundering. Among the items are an old pair of Peter's glasses, a picture of him when he was a boy, a baseball and bat of Jack's, plus the nightgown Maggie wore when she was taken to Neverland. The moonlight catches the gown in just the right way where we see it sparkle for a fleeting moment. Outside on the porch, Maggie tries to calm the boy down, assuring him he isn't in too much trouble. Moira has already gone to sleep, and the teenager doesn't want to be left alone with her thoughts on this night. Matthew feels similarly. He's always picked on by the other boys and just doesn't feel like he fits in. He isn't a troublemaker, but is easily influenced and bullied. Tied around his neck is a small cloth bag. He was forced to get something from the attic and bring it back to the other kids to prove he was really one of them. When Maggie spots the brown bag, she almost recognizes it, but the memory is fuzzy.
What's in here anyway?
He pulls the string on the bag, and a cloud of pixie dust flies into the air. He sneezes, and the dust gets on Maggie.
Matthew!
I'm sorry.
Don't you dare say that again.
They go on to talk about Matthew's dream of one day finding his parents. He proceeds to describe what they might be like. His mother, caring and warm with a beautiful smile that could light up any room. His father, strong, brave, but understanding. They love each other, and that love made him. So at the end of the day, things can't be so bad. Matthew has bounced around to different foster homes his whole life. The Bannings have never had the heart to tell him his parents are likely never coming back, if they're even still around at all. Maggie almost gains the courage to tell him this then and there, but stops herself and looks away, sparing the boy any more pain. When she looks back up, Matthew, eyes closed, is floating in midair. Maggie is shocked.
Matthew, what? Get down here right now!
He opens his eyes.
Ah! What's happening? Miss Maggie, help me!
Matthew begins to fall from about 20 feet in the air. Instinctually, Maggie shouts,
Think a happy thought, Matthew!
Matthew shuts his eyes and stops himself from hitting the ground. When he opens them, he sees that he has more control over his new ability. Maggie is confused. How did she know that would work? A memory then floods back to her, clear as day.
Maggie, all you have to do is think one happy thought and fly like me.
Maggie's often melancholy face stretches into a soft smile. She realizes that she too is now floating. Matthew begins to get more confident in the air and flies higher.
Miss Maggie, look! We're flying!
He starts to ascend, further and faster.
Matthew, get back here!
She flies after him. The following scene can be a short, whimsical chase through London's night sky. They fly past Big Ben when Matthew notices a bright star in the distance. He propels himself toward it.
Follow me, Miss Maggie! Woo-hoo!
He takes off like a rocket, and Maggie struggles to keep up with him. The horizon brightens until the screen is filled with light. When the light fades, we see Maggie and Matthew lying asleep on the shore of an island. Waves lap behind them as the sun shines brightly in the sky above. Maggie opens her eyes and blocks the sun with her hand. She groggily rises to her feet and looks around. Incredulous, she seems to recognize her surroundings.
No, this can't be real.
Where are we?
Maggie peers behind her to see Matthew is up. A look of wonder fills his face. She lies to him.
I don't know. Let me see that bag.
Matthew hands the brown bag of pixie dust over to Maggie.
I think it's empty.
She turns it upside down, but nothing comes out. Getting nervous, she looks around for threats.
How did you know thinking a happy thought could make us fly?
Haven't you ever read Peter Pan? Come on, this way.
She walks ahead toward the edge of a dense jungle.
Who?
Matthew follows quickly to catch up. Banning spots movement behind the foliage.
Where are we?
Shh! They freeze for a few seconds before slowly walking further down the edge of the jungle. They pick up the pace when a man exits onto the sand. A chase then ensues as more people pop out of the jungle. Exposed on the beach, Maggie and Matthew run into the foliage for cover. The chase is intense, but short. Before they know it, they're surrounded by people holding spears and bows. A teenage girl, similar to Maggie's age, walks out from behind a few of the natives. It's obvious she's in charge. In the distance, a rumble can be heard. Everyone looks toward it, and we see Thud Butt rolling with great speed toward the group. He knocks over most of the natives and stands up dizzily in front of the girl. A few more Lost Boys drop in from the trees. It's a small group, including Ace, Too Small, No Nap, and more. The native girl looks angry and yells beyond them.
Rufio!
Above them all, a shadow stands perfectly at the center of the sunlight. The figure has a very distinct shape. It hops down and lands in the dirt. Rufio stands upright with a smirk. He's as cocky as ever.
This is Lost Boy territory, Princess. Take your scugs and go before we move you ourselves.
Tiger Lily, not one to waste words, glares at Rufio before motioning to Maggie and Matthew. Everyone looks their way.
Who are you two supposed to be?
I'm Matthew, and she's
Maggie quickly covers his mouth.
We're just trying to get home.
Did you escape Hook's ship?
Thud steps forward with sympathy in his eyes. Maggie takes in the question and answers honestly.
Yes! Once.
Thud convinces a reluctant Rufio to let the pair stay with them for the night. Tiger Lily and her tribe leave without incident, but tension remains between the two groups. Matthew walks up to Rufio with a sincere compliment.
Thank you, Mr. Rufio. I like your hair.
Rufio looks down at him and pauses for a moment, unamused.
Somebody get this kid away from me.
He walks off, leaving Matthew's compliment unreciprocated. The boys follow their leader. That evening, we see the Lost Boys' new hideout is hidden underground. Around a fire, Thud and Maggie get to know each other a bit. She doesn't tell him her name, but Thud says there's something familiar about her that he can't put his finger on. We find out Hook burned down their old home some time ago. He did the same with Tiger Lily's tribe. Captain Hook has completely taken over the island and is the self-proclaimed King of Neverland.
Everything changed after, well...
A noise is heard outside. The Lost Boys rush to a large makeshift periscope and peer above ground. A horde of pirates are shown slashing through the jungle. Mr. Smee clumsily moves some leaves aside and yells upward.
Nothing here, Captain!
A figure slowly descends from floating above the trees. It's the trademark red garb and black wig of Captain Hook. He holds the sword of Peter Pan in his right hand. In his left, a lantern emits yellow light, or at least it looks that way. It's actually a bird cage holding a defeated, miserable Tinkerbell. Underground, Maggie leans forward to get a closer look. The figure turns around. It's Captain Hook, all right, but as he raises the light of Tinkerbell to his face, we see something unexpected. This is a 22-year-old Captain Jack Hook. Even after all these years, Maggie is able to recognize her brother. She gasps in horror.
Jack?
She steps back in disbelief and knocks over some pots and pans. Outside, the pirates are walking away when Jack hears the muffled clatter. Rufio grabs his sword and looks ready to fight as Thud and the others do their best to contain a hysterical Maggie. Jack turns around to see nothing amiss, but moves closer to the area. He lifts the cage containing Tinkerbell to light a spot close to the hidden periscope. The Lost Boys watch as he inspects closely. After a few seconds of silence, Smee speaks up.
Everything all right, Captain?
Jack grimaces.
Looks that way, doesn't it?
He floats into the air and hauntingly leads the pirates off. Underground, Maggie is released by the Lost Boys who were holding back her cries. Enraged, Rufio walks in front of her.
Who are you?
Eyes full of tears, she looks up to him and answers.
Maggie!
Rufio lifts her head higher with his sword tip.
Maggie who?
Banning! Maggie Banning!
The Lost Boys stand in shock. Rufio skeptically lowers his sword.
Pan's daughter? That's impossible.
It's true!
Matthew runs to the sobbing Maggie's side and hugs her. He pleads with Rufio.
That's her name! Leave her alone. Please.
Rufio drops his sword and looks to the Lost Boys, who are all speechless. We cut to the Jolly Roger, situated in an extravagant new location. The surrounding area puts the small pirate village in the first film to shame. Hook and his forces have taken over all of Neverland, and the spoils of victory are visible in every inch we see. Inside the ship, Smee dusts a painted portrait of James Hook as Jack sits where the former captain used to frequent. He slams his fist into the side of the chair.
We've scoured every bit of this godforsaken island and still no sign of that skunk-headed punk or his last couple of friends.
Smee rubs Jack's shoulder and gives him a pep talk.
Now don't you go worrying your pretty little head off about that, young man. He'll turn up soon enough. In the meantime, I say, enjoy the fruits of your labor.
He tosses Jack an apple that he promptly throws through a window.
I want him dead! Now, not later.
Jack glances at the original Hook's portrait.
If only Father were here, he would know what to do.
Aye, and he would. But you're in charge now. Who's got those snot-nosed Lost Boys on the run? Who chased off those bleeding Indians? Who burnt their little shacks to the ground? Who's the king of Neverland?
Jack looks down, disappointed. Smee puts his arm around him.
Captain Jack Hook. That's who.
Jack half smiles as Smee heads for the exit.
Smee.
The pirate turns around.
Could father ever fly? Like me?
Smee seems a little confused by the unexpected question, but puts on a fake smile.
James Hook ran, so Jack Hook could fly.
A satisfied grin crosses Jack's lips as he turns away. Smee's fake smile drops. He looks relieved Jack bought it and leaves. Think of Smee as an evil Alfred to Jack. He raised him after the events of the first film and completed his brainwashing. Jack believes himself to be the true son of Captain Hook, and Peter Pan's death is seen as his father's greatest victory. For a while, Tinkerbell tried to convince Jack who he really was, but by that point it was too late. Smee always said you can't trust fairies, and much like all his other lies, the young Banning believed it. In terms of Jack aging in real time, the specifics of the magic in Neverland and how time passes there have always been kept intentionally vague. In certain explanations, staying young is something you choose to do. In other versions, the Lost Boys all grow up eventually, so I think it would fit fine for Jack to age naturally as Smee guided him to become the new Captain Hook. The next day, Maggie is seen sulking, isolated from Matthew and the Lost Boys. Thud argues that Rufio should go talk to her. If she is really Peter Pan's daughter and Jack's sister, maybe she can help them. Being so close to Pan's death, the explanation of everything that's happened since then should come from Rufio. After muttering under his breath, the pathetic image of Maggie all by herself begrudgingly convinces him to go speak with her. Banning is sitting up against a tree, looking off into the distance when Rufio approaches. He's still stubborn and doesn't quite know what to say.
Yesterday, I wasn't trying to upset you.
I don't care about your apologies. I just want to go home.
Rufio snaps back.
Good, then go. All your family's ever done is make our lives worse.
He turns away and starts stomping back in the direction he came, but Thud and the other Lost Boys stand close by with their arms folded. Rufio catches their defiant stares and again, bitterly goes back. But when he returns, he sees Maggie quickly wipe away a tear, not wanting Rufio to see. In that moment, the boy's sympathies get the best of him, and he calmly sits next to her, joining her somber gaze into Neverland's beauty.
Maggie, your dad's...
Dead. I know. Somehow, I've always known.
He saved my life right before Hook stabbed him in the back. I had to watch him die.
Maggie looks to Rufio with sorrowful empathy.
The last thing he told me was to save Jack.
Why didn't you?
Rufio is offended.
I tried, okay? More than once. Hook really did a number on that kid.
Where's Hook now?
Rufio explains in a detailed narration as we flash back to when we left Neverland in the last film. After Peter was killed, Rufio and Hook engaged in a duel for the ages. Rufio's fury was contrasted by the wide and gleeful smile Hook boasted after every clash. The battle between the Lost Boys and the pirates started up again, but the boys completely lost their morale after seeing Peter go down. Conversely, the pirates were emboldened after the shock of Pan's death wore off. Rufio and Hook eventually fought to where the corpse of the crocodile stood. Rufio's youth and rage eventually outdid Hook's impeccable swordsmanship, and the boy stabbed him through his chest, piercing the crocodile behind. As the croc awoke above them, Hook didn't seem as bothered by his own demise as one would think. Instead, after a moment, he smiled.
Good form, young lad, but the game is over. Peter Pan is dead, and we both know you're no Pan, are you, Rufio? Rufio.
Hook mocks the boy with his last words as he fades away. Meanwhile, the croc has come back to life, and Rufio flees. The narration continues, and we find out that Jack, Smee, and a large portion of the pirates were able to escape. Tinkerbell was also captured in the chaos. When the boys went back to the village sometime after the battle, both the Jolly Roger and the crocodile were missing. They searched but couldn't find the whereabouts of Jack or the remaining pirates anywhere on the island or in the waters off it. All of Neverland mourned Peter's death. There was peace for a long while, but things were never the same. Much time passed, and everyone adjusted to life without Peter Pan again. But just when they became comfortable is when vengeance struck. The pirates returned one day with more numbers and savagery than ever before. They overwhelmed the Lost Boys, killing most of them and burning down everything close by. Rufio was shocked to see Captain Hook descend from the heavens, holding Tinkerbell in a cage. He had been resurrected from the dead, leading the charge. In a certain sense, that was true. But upon closer inspection, Rufio saw not James Hook, but a younger man in his place. They dueled among the flames, and after hearing the new captain say,
"This is for my father, the Pan Slayer, James Hook!"
Rufio realized who this really was and tried to tell him the truth, but Jack wouldn't have it. He knocked Rufio off a cliff and into the ocean, then continued the attack on the Lost Boys. Rufio saw the flames and smoke from the water below, but was powerless to stop it. In the coming days, the pirates not only killed most of the Lost Boys, the other fairies, and Chief Great Big Little Panther, but stole the Pan Sword, ran Tiger Lily's tribe out of their homes, took over the rest of the island, and built a new pirate city, where Captain Jack Hook sits as the self-proclaimed King of Neverland. Jack has since been dead set on finding the rest of the Lost Boys and killing Rufio for killing Hook. They've had small encounters over the following years, but Rufio was never able to get close to Jack as he floated above most of the battles. Jack's never wavered from Hook's brainwashing, and with Tink, he flies with the twisted, happy thought of his father, Captain Hook. The narration ends with Rufio and Maggie commiserating in the depraved situation they're stuck in.
I can't believe Jack is capable of something like that.
He's more Hook now than Pan. I'm surprised he can fly at all.
Maggie seems to have an idea.
No one's been able to get close to him since that first battle, yes?
He's always leading the attacks from the air.
What if he couldn't fly away? Or if I could fly up to him? If he saw my face, maybe...
Tink is the only fairy left. And Jack's not your brother anymore, Maggie. He won't listen.
He won't listen to you. He didn't even know who you were before Hook turned him. I'm his sister.
No offense, but you're probably a little too old for him to recognize you now.
There's only one way to find out.
A very Peter Pan-like mischievous smile crosses Maggie's face. Rufio smiles back, recognizing the spark. We cut to the middle of the pirate city. It's pretty much a marauder's paradise with drinking, fighting, and a wild, lively atmosphere. The Jolly Roger sits docked in the port as we see three figures enter the city. It's quickly apparent that they're Rufio, Maggie, and Matthew. Rufio hides his hair with a large hat and covers his face with an eye patch and scarf. Matthew wobbly takes each step on stilts and wears as much pirate paraphernalia as possible to hide his real appearance. Maggie wears a long fake beard with a pillow under her coat to resemble a round belly. Thud and the rest of the Lost Boys stayed back to guard the underground fort. They all agreed this mission would work better with a very small group. The goal is to get Maggie in front of Jack while the other two search for Tinkerbell. They walk around trying to blend in when a drunk pirate bumps into Maggie and sees her beard fall off. She quickly reattaches it, but the pirate notices and is about to yell before Matthew kicks him in the leg and Rufio punches him into the water off the dock. No one around them bats an eye, and they continue. Rufio spots Smee in the crowd at the market. He's making a giant plate of food for Jack. Delicately, Smee drops fruit, meat, and more on the platter and even samples a few pieces himself. As he turns around, Rufio bumps into him and keeps walking. The platter and all the food on it go everywhere. Smee is perturbed, but instead of saying anything to the passerby, he bends over to pick up the plate. Quickly, Matthew passes behind him and steals the keys on his waist. Smee notices a slight brush and turns around, but in the crowd, he can't tell who did it. He turns back around to his original position and bends over to pick up the plate when Maggie walks by. She knees him in the face, and Smee hits the boardwalk, KO'd. The trio make their way to the Jolly Roger and Hook's cabin. When they gain the attention of a few pirates on board, Matthew starts spinning a yarn to distract them. Rufio blocks the cabin door as Maggie uses one of the keys to enter. After a moment, the pirates knock off Matthew's hat to discover the obvious fact that he's a 9-year-old boy. They start making a ruckus when Rufio conks one out and pushes the other against a post with a sword to his neck.
Where do you keep your fireflies?
The pirate looks down at a hole in the deck. Rufio grabs him and jumps into the bowels of the ship, pulling the pirate along with him. After looking around to see the coast is clear, Matthew awkwardly follows. The cabin is empty. Maggie sees the portrait of James Hook on the wall and scowls at it. On a nearby desk, the captain's original Hook sits in a glass display case. She looks at it with disdain before a loud noise is heard. Maggie panics and hides behind the desk. Jack enters from a separate room and looks around.
Smee?
After a moment of silence, he picks up his hat and heads for the door, when Maggie takes a deep breath.
Jack!
The young captain turns around to see Maggie standing nervously behind the desk.
Jack, it's me. Please remember.
Jack looks confused as he takes a few steps toward Maggie.
It's me, Maggie, your little sister.
Jack doesn't know how to react.
Mum, Dad, you and me? Jack, don't you remember who you are? Let me get you out of here. We can go home.
Jack gets closer and looks as if a memory is coming back to him. But it's a ruse. He pulls out a small pistol and holds it to Maggie's head. With his fake father's portrait hanging behind him, Jack bites his bottom lip and smiles in the same way the old Hook used to.
I am home.
A window shatters and a bright light enters. It's Tinkerbell. She knocks over Jack just as Smee forces his way into the cabin with a dozen pirates. They all fire at Maggie and Tink. The fairy picks up the teenager and flies out of the shattered window. Maggie screams a few words before she's out of earshot.
Run, Jack! Run home!
Smee helps Jack to his feet, but is violently pushed off.
How in the fiery depths of hell was that?
I don't know, Captain.
Find out! And get that pixie bug back here, or you're all going to take a long walk off a short plank.
They all rush out, leaving Jack alone. He slams the desk where the original Captain Hook's hook is now laying flat. The glass display case was shattered by the gunfire. In a moment of uncertainty, he whispers to himself.
Run home.
Back at the Lost Boys' hideout, there are mixed emotions. Everyone is ecstatic to see Tink back, but Maggie's plan to save her brother didn't work. No one is more devastated by this than Maggie herself. She feels like she's put everyone in even more danger, on top of not getting through to Jack. Upon the group coming up with suggestions to keep moving before more pirate search parties arrive, Maggie runs off. Matthew and Thud start to go after her, but Rufio tells them she'll need some time on her own. Maggie runs for a long while before reaching an opening in the woods and collapsing to the ground in tears. She sobs into her arms on top of a large rock face. After a few seconds, something gets her attention. It moved past her before she can see what it was. She looks to a rock wall next to her and sees the shadow of Peter Pan. The enthusiastic silhouette seems to be pointing to a nearby pond. Bemused, Maggie cautiously follows in that direction. She glances over the rocks into the water below, where the reflection is not her own. Staring back is the face of Peter Pan. But as Maggie knew him, her eyes widen with wonder. The reflection smiles the only way her father could and speaks softly.
Don't cry, Maggie. You're not alone. Never alone.
Slowly, the reflection fades away.
Daddy.
She reaches out, but now only sees her own face in the sparkling surface. She stands up looking forward. Understanding and determination fill her demeanor. Maggie returns to the Lost Boys, confident and ready to fight. She says she has a plan, but she'll need to do one thing on her own first. We cut to the Lost Boys preparing for war. Their group is very small, but they're all taking things seriously. New weapons and armor are shown being assembled, with Rufio directing traffic. As the Lost Boys prepare for the following day's battle, Matthew seems uneasy. He looks out of place among the group, but has grown an attachment to them. Conflicted, he sits off by himself, throwing sticks into the burning fire pit. Despite finding him annoying at first, Rufio has taken a liking to the kid during and after their mission to free Tinkerbell. He approaches. Matthew throws a rock at a painted bullseye on the other side of the wall. It hits far from the intended target.
Hope your aim's better than that tomorrow.
I'm not going. I'll just get in the way.
He looks away, not making eye contact.
Oh, come on. Without you, we wouldn't have gotten Tink back.
That was dumb luck. We have to win tomorrow. You're better off without me.
Rufio ponders his response for a moment.
You know, I used to have a brother.
Really?
Yeah, small guy. Mom would call him my little sidekick. Did whatever I said, went wherever I went. After she got sick, we needed money, so I started pickpocketing. 20 here, 50 there. I got pretty good. When he found out, he was pissed. You should have seen this little guy lecturing me. Told me it was wrong, give it back, whatever. He said Mom would want stolen money, that she'd be disappointed in me. He was right. For the first time, he stood up to me. And he was right.
What happened to me?
After Mom died, they split us up. I never saw him again.
Matthew looks away sympathetically. Rufio turns to the kid.
You remind me of him.
Matthew looks up, surprised. Rufio walks off, leaving the boy to absorb the compliment. We cut to the next morning in the middle of the pirate city. We follow an occupant of the village go about his routine, drinking and stealing an apple from one of the fruit market stands. He takes a chomp and chews loudly, washing down the bite with a swig of alcohol. A shadow then slowly covers his face and gets the pirate's attention. He looks up to the rising sun, shielding his eyes. A wider shot shows all the other people in the market have noticed the same phenomenon. They all stop in their tracks and look up. Smee drags Jack out of the Jolly Roger cabin to show him. He squints as he looks up. The silhouettes of a handful of figures are seen floating in front of the bright sun. On the ground, a loud rumble is felt, getting more and more prominent. A war cry is heard in the distance as the pirate's attention shifts in the opposite direction. The air to Captain Hook widens his eyes. He screams to his followers, "Battle stations!" The pirates scurry away frantically. We're shown Maggie with Tiger Lily, who's leading her whole tribe toward the pirate city.
For Pan!
As they attack, Rufio talks strategy with the other hovering Lost Boys, Matthew, and Tinkerbell. They're all geared up with weapons and more. Rufio makes the call.
Bangarang!
They all fly fiercely toward the city. Jack takes out a small satchel of leftover pixie dust and dumps it over his head. He draws the pan sword and flies up to meet the charging Lost Boys. The battle rages on for a while, showing Tiger Lily and her people doing most of the damage. The Lost Boys and Tinkerbell are more pinpoint, taking out certain targets from the sky. Rufio and Jack engage in the most intense personal battle. They clash all around the city, flying above it and dueling in midair.
You killed my father!
Hook wasn't your father, Jack. Listen to me.
Jack refuses, battling with even more rage. Maggie hasn't been able to reach Jack. She's busy fighting any pirate that gets in her way and is backed up heavily by Tiger Lily. Meanwhile, Matthew is having a tough time focusing and is afraid to engage with the pirates below. In the air, Rufio has had enough. He's been trying to save Jack to honor the promise he made to Peter, but it's gotten him nowhere, and his anger starts to get the better of him. A slight amount of jealousy is at play as well, considering Rufio always hated being told he wasn't the leader Peter Pan was. Yet, here he is, fighting Pan's son, who's become the embodiment of Peter's ultimate enemy, the man who killed him. These conflicting emotions give way to Rufio battling with a more lethal approach. Eventually, he's able to disarm Jack and finally retrieve the Pan sword. He crosses the blades and holds them to Jack's throat, unhinged and breathing heavily. He just might end things once and for all. But then a voice is heard close by.
Rufio!
He turns to see Matthew pleading with him.
Don't do it. Don't let Hook win.
Rufio gets a hold of himself and calms down. He lowers the swords just as a gunshot is heard. Matthew has been hit by a bullet and drops into the nearby ocean. On the ground, we see the smoking gun of his assailant. It's a smirking Mr. Smee. Rufio, distracted, has the tables turned on him by Jack, who quickly takes Pan's sword and grabs Rufio from behind, holding it to his neck.
No more lucky getaways. No more running. No more Rufio.
Smee is shown smiling even wider as he looks up at the scene in the middle of the madness around him. But something breaks through the chaos. A voice. Soft, sad, and sweet.
When you're all alone, far away from home, there's a gift the angel sent when you're alone.
Jack turns around slowly and becomes mesmerized by the song. It's almost silent on screen as Maggie is shown separated from the fighting, making eye contact with Jack.
Angels always send a star when you're alone.
Tinkerbell flies by to sprinkle a bit of pixie dust over her, and she begins to slowly rise as Jack lowers, losing his once happy thought, the lie that Captain Hook was his father.
At night when I'm alone, I lie awake and wonder.
They meet in the air, and Maggie takes her brother's hand.
So I know I'm not alone when I'm here on my own.
They land with the battle still proceeding in the background.
You're not alone, not really alone.
It then all comes back to the son of Peter Pan.
Maggie?
She wells up and hugs her brother tightly. After a moment of shock, Jack closes his eyes and returns the embrace. A single tear runs down his cheek. Smee is able to snap out of it and angrily aims his revolver at Maggie. Before he can fire, Tinkerbell races in and holds up the gun in a struggle. Before Rufio can move on Smee, Matthew comes bursting out of the water and flies into him, knocking the pirate down. The gun slides out of sight as Smee crawls away. The boy is wounded, bleeding from the shoulder, but okay. Rufio flies in to retrieve him. The battle continues in the pirate city as a look of anger returns to Jack's face. He rips off Hook's jacket and wig, throwing them to the ground. Rufio lands in front of the Bannings, and Jack looks on at him apologetically.
I'm sorry.
Keep the apology. Take the sword.
Rufio holds out the Pan sword for Jack to take. Rufio smiles, and Jack follows suit. He embraces the blade, and the pair go into battle together. With Jack on their side, the Lost Boys and Tiger Lily's tribe gain a commanding advantage. Smee is seen grabbing a few things from the Jolly Roger cabin. The last thing he snatches is Captain Hook's hook. When he exits, Jack spots him escaping and paces toward the bosun. Smee begs him off, walking backwards. All the items except the hook fall from his hands. They come to the edge of the ship. Smee has no place to go and steps backward onto the plank, still trying to plead with Banning as he clutches the hook to his chest.
Jack, my dear Jackie boy, you remember who took care of you after all these years, yeah? Who protected you when all these fools wanted you dead? Smee! That's me! I was always on your side, boy. Just give me some time to explain.
A ticking can be heard in the background. Smee notices it and turns slightly to see the back of the giant crocodile rise and sink beneath the deep blue surface. Smee freaks out. He loses balance and falls, screaming on his way down. The croc jumps out of the water and consumes him whole, plunging back into the water with a massive splash. Jack looks down with a hint of remorse, but a sense of justice is the prevailing emotion.
Time's up.
Elsewhere on the battlefield, the war is won. Tiger Lily and Rufio claim victory as the tribe and remaining Lost Boys celebrate. Maggie, Matthew, Tink, Thud, and the rest are joined by Jack, who again embraces his sister. Rufio and Tiger Lily walk up to the siblings, smiling. Jack stands in front of Rufio and hands him the pan sword.
You are the pan now.
Rufio accepts.
I know you won't let him down.
A weight has lifted from Rufio's shoulders.
Never.
Jack is reassured before turning his attention.
Tink, I think I'm finally ready to go home.
Me too.
I'm staying. Little Matthew makes his way out from behind the taller Lost Boys. Maggie protests.
Matthew, you can't stay here.
There's nothing left for me back home.
Well, what about your parents?
They're not coming back, Miss Maggie. You don't have to lie to me anymore. I know they're not.
Maggie is saddened, but can feel how at peace the boy is.
We'll take care of him. I promise.
Rufio puts his hand on Matthew's shoulder. They all share a look of understanding as Tinkerbell sprinkles fairy dust over the Bannings one last time. Maggie starts to float, but it takes Jack an extra moment. He closes his eyes and can hear his father's voice.
Believe, son. Always believe.
He begins to rise into the air, and with a wave, the siblings fly off. Neverland and all its inhabitants shrink beneath them. We dissolve to some time later. Maggie has already reunited with her mother and is walking Moira through Kensington Gardens. She has a surprise for her. They get to the Peter Pan statue, where Moira seems unimpressed.
Honey, I love you, but I think I've had enough fairy tales for one lifetime.
She takes a step away when a voice is heard.
Mom.
Somehow, Moira can recognize this young man's voice. She turns around to see Jack standing there under the statue. His smile could light up all of London. She warily walks toward him and looks into his eyes. She doesn't dare let herself hope, but curiosity takes over.
Jack?
It's me, Mom. It's really me.
Her expression changes to that of miraculous acceptance.
My boy?
She hugs him with an almost superhuman grip. Tears roll down her face as she begins sobbing. Jack hugs her just as tightly and finally, after all these years, looks content. Maggie joins in to make it a group hug. With her arms around her mother and brother, she looks up to the Pan statue before closing her eyes and welcoming the fact that her family, at long last, is reunited. The camera pans over to the statue watching over them as snow begins to fall and we fade to black. And there you have it, a two-part Hook story spanning across two feature-length films. It would have been a true two-parter, but with very different takes on the same world. I think all the main characters are given proper endings to their altered arcs. Maggie is able to return to Neverland and save her brother, Jack finally turns against his captors, Matthew finds a place he fits in, Smee gets his comeuppance for keeping Hook's lie going, and our boy Rufio reaches his full potential as a leader on par with, or even a level above, Peter Pan. Letting his guard down and empathizing with Matthew gave him a level of understanding that Pan didn't always share with those around him. And he ended up keeping his promise to Peter, never truly giving up on Jack. It goes without saying that if Rufio lived on, things could have been radically different. But I want to hear what you guys think. What would you have done with the Rufio character if he appeared in more stories? How would it affect characters like Peter, Hook, Maggie, Jack, and the other Lost Boys? Sound off in the comments below. As always, make sure you check out our podcast for audio versions of this and all our episodes. Again, a massive thank you goes out to Dante Basco for voicing the iconic Rufio in this video. Do not forget to check out his projects like the Rufio prequel and more in the links provided in the description. We'll see you next time for another episode of FanScription. Until then,
To live will be an awfully big adventure.